Hello and welcome to Juliet and Lucy's Quiet Leadership Revolution, the podcast for senior and aspiring leaders who want to make their voice heard and their impact felt through thoughtful, reflective, confident leadership. People who want to lead by example, bring others with them, and who are ready to learn and adapt to deliver brilliant results. I'm Juliet Corbett.
And I'm Lucy Gower. Today we're going to be talking about creativity, and in particular, what are the barriers that stop us all doing our best creative thinking?
And I am really thrilled that I get to basically interview you, Lucy, for this episode, because you are the worldwide expert in innovation and creativity. Tell us a little bit about the book that you've written, first of all, so that you get the details right.
Oh, thank you so much. I mean, I'm delighted because I get to talk about my favourite topic. So a few years ago, I wrote a book called The Innovation Workout, which is kind of your step-by-step guide to creativity and then doing something with that creativity, turning it into action.
Great, fantastic. So my first question, how do you define creativity, and is it different to innovation?
Great question. So I define creativity as our ability to have ideas, to perhaps make new connections within our brain and come up with something new or different. It's essentially about problem solving, and it's the thought process in terms of how we solve problems. I often, one of the barriers, not to jump in too soon, but one of the barriers is that we don't always identify as creativity something that we can do because it gets muddled up that it might be drawing or being good at art, and it's not that. It's about problem solving. And then I define innovation as putting it into action. That's the doing bit. So you can have a million brilliant ideas, a million different ways to solve a problem, but if you don't do anything with it, you're not innovating. So innovation is the taking action part, and it's as straightforward as it sounds.
Fantastic. Actually, that's really much clearer for me than it was before. The idea about creativity being a thought process, either solo or with other people, but then actually if you're taking action, that's where the innovation comes in. And it's really interesting to think that actually you could have a highly creative group of people or culture, but if there isn't a habit around taking action on that, it's not necessarily going to produce the results that they're looking for, depending on what their goals are.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. If there isn't a habit and if there isn't a culture that enables action to happen as well, and that's a lot of the work that I do. It's not that organisations and individuals are stuck for great ideas. It's the bit around making them happen that is even harder.
Yeah.
And perhaps that innovation piece is a topic for another day as we hone in on that creativity bit today.
So you've mentioned one of the barriers there around people connecting creativity, thinking it means artistry. You know, if I'm not good at art, I'm not creative, therefore I'll kind of dismiss my creative abilities for the rest of my life, which is clearly one of the barriers that people experience to creative thinking. I wonder if you could run us through some of the top barriers that you see frequently when you're working with individuals and teams, and maybe that's one of the top ones, or maybe there are other things that get in people's way before they even get to that point.
Yeah, of course. I think that's the number one thing. People think it's about being good at art or being good at drawing. And when we talk about how it's not that and how it's problem solving, there's this like sigh of relief and kind of pennies dropping around the room as people go, maybe I can do this. Maybe I'm already good at it after all. So I think that's the biggest one, being really clear about the definition. And creativity is a bit of a buzzword. And so it can mean different things in different organizations. So if you are listening and you're leading an organization and you want your organization to be more creative, get over the first barrier by being really crystal clear about what it means in your organization, and then what that means in terms of how you expect people to behave.
Mm-hmm.
And then that brings me on to my whole list of barriers. So often, even when people know that it's not about being good at drawing, there's element of self-belief that we don't necessarily believe that we're creative. And I think this comes from, over the years when we're growing up and some of our very deep entrenched belief and value systems, and many people have been told that they're not creative. You're a data person, so you're not creative, is something that comes up quite a lot. And that's utter rubbish. So I think the first thing is that as human beings, we all have the ability to think what if, to put ideas and concepts together in different ways in order to come up with something new. We can think about what might happen in the future if I do X or Y. And because our brains are wired like this, inherently, we are all creative. You could argue that it comes from our basic survival. We survive. One of the reasons is because we're good at solving problems. And so every single one of us is good at creativity. It might look different for all of us. Some people are amazing at seeing patterns in data that other people can't see. Some people can open the fridge and whatever's in it can cook a marvelous dinner. Like it's different for us all. So if we get away from creativity is uniform and creativity and lean towards creativity is something we can all do. We're all unique individuals and we've all got ways in which we see the world that other people don't. And in my view, that's creativity. So if you're listening and thinking, I'm not sure what Lucy's talking about, have a think about if there's something that you do and it comes really naturally, it comes really easily, and other people go, wow, I wouldn't have thought about it like that, or I wouldn't have seen it in that way. That's likely that thread of where your unique, I'm going to call it brand of creativity lies. So the second barrier is we don't believe that we are creative. And I know that me telling you that you are might not be quite enough, but hold on to that thought for a little bit, because as human beings, we're all able to think creatively and solve problems.
That's fantastic. I see that so frequently in people that I work with as well, that they immediately downplay the things that are so easy to them because they think it's so easy to everybody. And yet those are the little strands of uniqueness, and it often is around creative problem solving because they see the world in a different way. So yeah, really important to overcome that barrier.
Exactly. And then I think all of the barriers I'll talk about are linked, but there's a piece around confidence and self-confidence. So often, if we are thinking creatively, we're trying to solve a problem, our solution might be novel, new, unheard of. And it takes quite a bit of bravery to say, I've got this way of doing this thing that is different. It might have a better result. Let's try it. If it's never been heard of before. And I think our self confidence can very frequently get in the way. And so we tend to think, oh no, well, I won't say that because I'm not quite sure that it's right. And if you work in an organization where you don't feel safe to suggest the idea and people will accept it, build on it, be curious and ask questions, then it's really difficult to be confident in creativity. So as leaders, we've got a really big responsibility to create environments where it's safe to suggest ideas and where you build on ideas and you're curious and you play and you kind of ask questions rather than kind of revert to, well, that doesn't sound plausible, so we're just going to keep doing things the way that we've always done it. So that piece around confidence is really key, and you have a really powerful role in helping people to build their own confidence for thinking creatively and solving problems.
I love that you just said that. One of the things you said there is, I'm not sure it's right, so I don't think I'll say it. I love the idea that we have this concept that there is a right and wrong answer to these things. And I suppose if you're being creative, it's having that self-confidence is realizing there is no right answer, and we're going to come to the better answer by playing around with and building on lots and lots of different ideas and input, which is really important, isn't it?
And actually, we're going to come to our best answer by having lots and lots of different
Mm.
ideas and picking the best one and not stopping at the first idea that sounds like it'll be all
Yes,
right and
yeah, definitely.
it'll do the job.
Keep going. Tell us a few more barriers.
So I think linked to this sort of sense of there is one single right answer or I want to get it right is this whole piece around fear of failure and kind of perfectionism. And I do a lot of work with teams around, creating an environment where creativity can thrive and helping to unlock this piece around fear and fear of failure. I think that failure is a real blocker for creative thinking, for sure. I think that we have this feeling that we want to kind of do our best work. We learn that we get rewarded in school for getting things right. I got a example, a little anecdote that I often talk about where I'm at school and I have 20 questions and I get 18 right and I get two wrong. And the response that I got from my teachers long time ago now, but was, well, what about the two that you got wrong? Not the celebration for the 18 that I got right. So I learned that I make progress by getting things right, by kind of ticking boxes. And actually, if creativity is around making new connections, almost experimenting, it's more about inquisitive inquiry that we should be rewarded for when it comes to creativity than getting tick boxes right of things that have gone before and have been tried and tested. And actually, psychologists as far back as the 1970s, when they're talking about creativity, and I've said, as human beings, we are wired to come up with new solutions and solve problems. And it's not a case of you are creative or you're not creative. It's about mindset again, and it's about a playful and curious mindset. So if you've ever been to a workshop where the facilitator is trying to make you play, sometimes that works really well. I've got a whole opinion on excruciating icebreakers, but we're trying to get into a playful mindset that's different from day to day, because that is when our creative brains are more likely to flourish and be working, when we're playful but also when we're relaxed. I acknowledge that being in a workshop might not be the most relaxing thing for many people listening, which is why when I run workshops, I work really, really hard to make it genuinely relaxing, and also acknowledge that lots of people do their really good thinking when they're on their own, not in a room full of people. So making sure that there's different ways of thinking that can speak to lots of different people's unique view on the world and where they tap into their best creative
Yeah, and
thinking.
just on that, so the whole point of bringing a well, I think a whole point of bringing a group of people together to be creative is the fact they have that diversity of thought, diversity of experience, cognitive diversity in all its ways. That diversity is contributing to the chance that you're going to come up with something novel, unique, that really solves the problem in a in
Yes.
a in an excellent and creative way. And so if we're particularly wanting to harness that diversity of thought, creating environments both, and you mentioned workshops, so that's like a time limited environment, and then there's also the culture being the non-time limited way people experience their particular workplace is particularly important because different people will want to do this in different ways as well as coming up with different ideas. So that idea that you've just shared there about having some people want to work individually, some people like to work in groups, making sure that there's, a little bit of forced fun with regards to kind of breaking the day to day. This is how we always work, so we're going to do the same in this workshop, but not making it painful for people in terms of it being really excruciating and kind of putting people well outside their comfort zone just for the sake of it. So all of this idea of being able to allow each unique person to work in the way that works best is of course important for everything, but I'm guessing it's really fundamental when we're trying to generate diverse viewpoints that lead to creative problem solving.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And actually, running a workshop will be a barrier for many people who, at the thought of having to turn up to a workshop, either in real life or online, with lots of people, is just the worst thing ever, which kind of links in to a couple more barriers. There's something around stress and creativity. So I've asked thousands of people over the years where they do their best thinking. And most people tell me situations when they are feeling relaxed. A very few people have their best ideas when they're at their desk, um, emails coming in, feeling stressed out. A deadline can be really helpful, and for some people, but then I think that's the learning point that we're all different in terms of when and where we do our best thinking. So understanding that about yourself and your team can be helpful to encourage that. When we are all the same, we get groupthink and there's less scope for creativity. When we're different and have different perspectives, different experiences, and we are safe to debate them, that's when creativity really shines. And so, in most workplaces, and we've talked in a previous episode about that kind of badge of busy and that feeling that we've always got to be busy, and we've done some work about helping people make time to think. It's exactly that time of think and that reduction of cortisol, the stress hormone that you need for creative thinking. You need to be able to ponder, to be curious, to percolate. And what happens in modern working environments, generally speaking, is that we're really, really busy, and having time to think almost feels like that's the thing that we do when everything else is done. But from a almost like a cognitive perspective, if we want to get the most out of our teams in terms of creativity, we need to reduce the levels of stress and give people the freedom to be able to pop out for a walk, to move away from their screen, to do the things that they enjoy doing, where the ideas flow. And essentially, our brain is allowed to make different neural connections, which is where our new ideas come from.
I think we've all experienced that. The barrier of stress is basically it's a barrier to high
Yeah,
performing teams, full stop. But yeah, I can see that it links really clearly into creativity and creative problem solving. Yeah, definitely.
it is really hard to think creatively when you're stressed out.
Yeah. Tell us about some other barriers. Is there anything else that's going to hold us back before we start talking about the positives and how we can curate the culture of creativity?
I think the culture in an organization can be a big barrier. So
Mm.
things that I see are that people are encouraged to be creative, almost like lip service, and then none of the factors are put into place that helps to enable that. So yes, we want you to be really creative, but your day is 9 to 5 and it's absolutely jam packed with meetings and tight deadlines to deliver on. Yes, we want to be out of our comfort zone and find new ways to reach our customers or to look after our employees, but we don't want to do anything different when it really comes to it. We want you to think differently, but we don't want to fail. We want to get it right, which is why I spend a lot of time helping teams talk about their failures and what they've learned from it in order to make it okay. So that environment that we work in, and our managers and our leaders can be massive enablers of creative environments, and they can be huge barriers
Mhm.
too. I think I've kind of listed all the core barriers. The only one that I haven't really talked about is like, oh, we think that creative ideas and innovation is all about technology. It isn't.
Yes.
It's often a simple little tweak or change that can make how we work more effective, more efficient. It doesn't have to be a complex tech solution. It's often really simple little changes that add up to make a really big difference.
So that interesting. That was going to be my next question, which is this sort of belief that creativity, I suppose it's the innovation maybe stage of the actual doing, but it's going to be expensive. It's going to need lots of high tech capability. And actually, none of that's really true. It doesn't need to be expensive. It doesn't need to involve technology at all, potentially.
No, not at all. It's about, if you strip it right back to its core, it's about solving problems in new ways. There's a whole line of thought about frugal innovation and about how, not having budget can be a almost like a burning platform to make some sort of change.
Mhm.
So no, it can be the smallest change, like, oh, I'm not going running in the mornings, well, I'm going to put my trainers by the door and go to sleep in my running kit in order that I don't have any friction about getting out of bed and getting out of the door, for example. That doesn't actually cost anything. I don't know, might cost you a relationship depending on what your running kit's like. But yeah, it's small, it's solving problems and experimenting with different ways to do it.
And then the other question that comes to mind as well is around how we might be able to use AI sometimes to spur some of this creativity as well. So, and free AI, not complicated, expensive, cutting edge, but just using kind of the latest version of free chat GPT. Having conversations with generative AI can actually be quite creative, can't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I'm still experimenting. And the way that I see it about ChatGPT or different AI applications is that, again, it's a different perspective. And it is easier. We were talking about sort of using it for copywriting, and it's easier to edit something than it is to edit a blank page. So my thoughts around that is that it is a rich area to investigate, to find, again, just different perspectives or different starting points to your creative thinking. And there can be some great solutions that come out of a different starting point that you are thinking about, because you're using AI is a different starting point to if you were just on your own trying to come up with a solution. And I
Yeah.
think there's healthy curiosity and exploring how AI can help you with whatever sort of work or projects that you've got on your list at the minute.
Yeah. So as you mentioned there, I think, I mean, I frequently use it for copywriting. I guess there's a creativity in some of that as well, although it's all only ever a starting point because it can make some really
Yeah.
horrendous sounding sentences if you leave it to its own devices. Um, but actually, I also use it a lot for what questions should I be asking myself. So when I'm doing something where I'm trying to push the boundaries and be more creative, I'll actually ask it, I'm doing this, I give it a little bit of context. I'm, trying to find some new ideas for XYZ. What questions should I ask myself? And then it will list me. I'll often ask for 20 or so. I'll ask for a large number of them because a good handful will be unhelpful. But it's surprising how frequently actually there's at least a couple of little things in there which I never would have thought of on my own. And yet
Yeah.
just me and ChatGPT have been able to have a creative conversation. So I think there's something in there about using it as a partner to spark ideas,
Yes.
acknowledging that
Yeah.
then it's the human brain which is best designed to then kind of screen which are the useful ideas and then take them to the next
Yeah.
step, maybe to a team, to other people
Yeah.
to play around with. But I think it's actually a really exciting partner to play around with,
I
and that
agree.
idea of play, we're all playing with it still because none of
Yeah.
us really know what it's
Yeah.
fully capable of. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And you could even ask, tell me the 10 most ridiculous ideas to solve this problem, see what you get back. You're playing with it, you're being curious, and you're starting in a different point to your normal neural pathways, which will take you in different directions, providing you have the time and space and you're not stressed out to just play around and explore some of those different solutions. And when I'm saying, ask for the most ridiculous solutions to this problem, that's about your ridiculous starting point that then you can keep working on to see if there's something that you could make realistic within that. And that's a different starting point to if you are coming back to the way that you as an individual always think.
So it's really interesting actually that those barriers that you've just listed for us, yeah, they're all things that I personally experienced and have seen at, in action in teams that I've worked with as well. Um, so I think I can really recognize all of that. One of the threads that runs through a lot of those is this idea that just sitting in a room telling myself to be creative is unlikely to produce a particularly creative solution. And instead, what you've described is a curiosity-led playfulness that allows us to combine different ideas. And it's often that idea of building on something by combining it with other ideas, a crazy spark of a joke that somebody makes to kind of
Mm-hmm.
shift the energy in the room. Of course, the jokey idea isn't actually going to be the final idea, but it's surprising how frequently that then sparks a new train of thought in somebody that then they come to the point where it's like, oh, but actually, hang on a minute, we can't do that because, and then someone else, oh, no, 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 we can because this other idea that they've had can combine with it. It is about combining ideas either in our own mind as individual or combining them with others in a group setting. And that's the theme that comes through is the having the psychological safety to do that in a way which we all can feel confident. We don't have that fear of failure. We have the self-confidence to share something which can sound a bit wacky, a bit silly, because that's what we are as a group contracted to do. We've agreed with each other. This is the frame of mind that we're going into this particular meeting with. That runs through everything that you've said, doesn't
Yeah,
it?
exactly. And I think a really helpful question to ask is, how might we make this happen? And permission to come up with all sorts of things that may or may not be realistic. In fact, I encourage you to to go as broad as you can possibly think and bounce ideas off of each other. And that bouncing of ideas and different ways of thinking and working is most likely to get you to a solution. What when we're busy, we end up not having the time to do that, and we keep going for the most feasible solution that we can get done as quickly as possible. And I see this with so many clients that I work with, that the same ideas seem to be churning round and round, and they perhaps lack a bit of enthusiasm to get them going, because we've settled for the idea that seems the best, but we haven't given our amazing brains the freedom to be able to just have, another 10, 20, 30 minutes to just be curious and experiment with, how might we make this happen? What are all the ways that we could make this happen? And then choose the best two or three to hone in on a little bit more. And I think there's, for some people, that idea of like be having fun at work, and I joke about fun within a framework, and it's different in every culture. Um, and that's why I think I said that, workshops, if they're run well, can be brilliant. If they're run badly, they can be really, really tough for people. But just being able to have the time and space to bounce ideas around in whatever playful way works for your organization and culture and how you sit within it, that's kind of the key. There's not a one size fits all.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as well, if you're listening to this and thinking, I can't see myself doing this, there'll be a way that you can adapt it to your own leadership style or your own personality as well. So for some people, bringing in some humor and saying, for this particular thing, because we're looking for creativity, I'm going to be dialing up my own humor a bit more, obviously making sure it's very appropriate, not inappropriate humor, but being able to put yourself as a leader in a slightly vulnerable position by coming up with yourself some slightly wacky, crazy ideas early on.
Yeah,
That for some people that might be really comfortable, really easy. You just need to give
yeah,
yourself permission, set the context, and go for it. For others, that's going to feel really painful, but there'll be something else that you can do. You can
yeah,
adapt it to your leadership
yeah.
personality.
And if you're not the person that feels, if you're a leader, I think that there's a danger of whatever you lead with in terms of this sort of topic of creativity, other people then end up, whether consciously or subconsciously, trying to follow suit and kind of sort of play to your strengths. Actually, as a leader, a different way you might think about approaching it is stepping back and giving everyone permission. And you might build on other people's, but often when I'm running a workshop, I have a workshop rule that hippos go last, hippos being highest individual paid person in an organization, or that can shorthand for most influential person in an organization. Hippos go last, because if hippos go first, people tend to conform with what the hippo's saying, again, consciously or subconsciously. Hippos go last and can build on everybody else's, the dynamic shifts. And that's when it's subtle, but you're creating this environment where people feel safe because they've suggested something and the leader has gone, oh, yes, and what about if we did this? Or how could we shift that to make that work? That's a really powerful way to position your leadership in creating an environment where creativity really is a thing and not just a value stuck on a wall or a tick box exercise.
Yes, absolutely. So your effort as a leader goes into making everyone else feel safe and feel valued. And then it's not necessarily your cognitive ability as the leader to come up with the answer. It is your leadership style to create that environment and ask the questions, suggest general directions, but not then actually constraining the conversation around you.
100%. And I think that the leader's role, where the leader can make the most impact, is exactly as you say, Juliet, creating that environment and being really clear on what are the important problems that we as an organisation or as a team need to be focusing our creativity on to solve. Because I'm acknowledging everything that I said about making time and space to think. There isn't time in the day for time and space to think about everything, but helping your organization focus on the areas to apply that thinking where you're going to be making the most impact. That's where I see your really important leadership role.
Yeah, which beautifully links to strategy in terms of identifying which are the areas that you want to be or feel are going to get the most results by focusing on certain areas strategically and improving some areas whilst not trying to do everything all the time for everybody. And actually, in our next episode, we're going to be talking about strategy a little bit more. So it kind of connects through to that as well. Before we finish up this episode, Lucy, what do you want people to take away? If there was one or two things you want people to take away from as they listen to this, what do you want that to
One
be?
or two. That's a tough one. One or two. I think that it is that the belief in yourself and everyone in your organization, you're all creative. You got to figure out for everyone when and where and how you are your best creative self. And as a leader, to create the time and space and environment in terms of some of the things we've talked about, being the person that builds on other people's ideas, being really clear about the questions that you want people to work on, sharing some of your own failures, leading by example, and everything that we've talked about today in terms of behaviors that help to instill a creative environment in an organization.
Yeah. And it all stems from that mindset of if this could be really exciting, this can be really joyful. And if it's focused on the areas that you want to be focusing on strategically, it can absolutely make a massive difference to the results that you can deliver as a team. Having this ability to think creatively, that's absolutely fantastic. So as we wrap up our conversation today, if you're listening to this and it's been helpful, please could you follow and rate the podcast wherever you're listening to it, whichever app platform you like to listen in. It helps us to make sure that other leaders find the podcast and it can help more and more people over time as well. And thank you for spending this time with us. Don't forget that if we want to be making our voice heard and our impact felt, then we need to gift ourselves the space to think, the courage to lead, and the confidence to adapt. I'm Juliet Corbett.
And I'm Lucy Gower. We hope you'll join us next time for the Quiet Leadership Revolution.